This week's episode of Ranger Reject was mental, with some pretty interesting twists in the story already showing themselves. For example, wow, talk about Yumiko Suzukiri, who is revealed to have known about Duster D's real identity, going as far to cover for him and then offer D a sort of alliance to take down the Rangers? But as well, we were introduced to a huge source of the Rangers' powers, the artifacts, which is extremely important in the plot of this series. So we're gonna break down every bit of this episode and analyze it. As well, at the end of the video, we'll be going over some of your comments from the previous video to spotlight the beautiful Sea Tactics community. Support me by dropping a like and subscribing if you don't want to miss a Ranger Reject video. Buy some gamer subs using my partner code to get 10% off. Become a patron to support me directly. Buy some of my sick ass merch, and if you want to contribute to our growing Discord community, please do and join. All the links you need are in the description, so check them out. The opening of this episode is very important, so don't forget it. One of the main factors is why the Rangers were able to defeat the Dusters when the Sky Fortress appeared was because of these so-called divine artifacts, which are basically weapons. This transitions beautifully into a training sequence where we see D, who is struggling to run laps around this gym. This is something I appreciated about this episode, was how they show D as this inferior person in almost every single way to not only a dragon keeper, but even an ordinary human like Yumiko or Sakurama. Simply running is already sapping the energy from D, so he's kind of weak. And an interesting tidbit is that while listening to the Red Keeper spout out a bunch of hoopla about the divine artifacts, he curses them at first for the entire act they're playing up, but he then realizes, oh, well, there is no way that everyone can know about this being an act, and corrects himself, showing respect for humans in the process. Interesting. This shows that D maybe has more of a human side than one would initially believe or initially expect, especially since the Dusters are supposed to invade Earth and take it over. He seems kinda nice towards humans overall, despite what he may think about them at times and how he may act. He even has to remind himself to keep his eyes on the prize, taking out the Keepers who initially wiped out their bosses, otherwise known as the Executives. He essentially wants revenge. Afterwards, D heads to the Rangers HQ to most likely confront and kill them. This episode honed in on D's bad planning skills, as immediately he is told that the Keepers aren't at HQ at all. D very much feels like in this episode he's out of his depth and can barely keep up, not knowing pretty much anything he'd need to know on how to take down these Keepers. But that's when we are finally properly introduced and given names to the best boy and best girls of this series, Hibiki Sakurama and Yumiko Suzukiri, in all of their glory. Sakurama, this precious boy, immediately runs up to D and is ecstatic to see that he is taking the recruitment exam. This really is an infectious part of Sakurama's character, and how he is always so excited and upbeat about things of this nature, which, take note of that because I don't think D ever did. But as Yumiko enters the picture, Sakurama rubs up against D, which that I didn't realize. Phrasing, which showcases a major chink in the armor of these Dusters. They are extremely weak, as shown in episode 1, when one of the Dusters hit a whiteboard and it nearly broke his hand. They're so fragile, simply touching them could start to break their disguise. They're basically like papier-mâché villains in some way, but Yumiko is very keen to observe what D brushes aside as nothing. This is the first hint of the episode that Yumiko has such good intuition that she can see through D's disguise pretty much immediately. But once again, D thinks to himself that humans are gullible and can't see through their disguise. But the truth, is so very cruel. Our next scene takes place in the Sky Fortress, where Red and Blue Keepers essentially make their way in to bully the Dusters and remind them that they're the top dogs. But also, they're looking for Duster D because of the stunt he pulled back in the first episode, which, if you missed it, I talked about the episode in detail here. This is your standard intimidation scene for the Dusters and showcases the unfair dynamic between the two factions. The Keepers are abusive and unfair, while the Dusters have been beaten down so much, all they can really do is just take the abuse. They even try to put the Dusters under the supervision of two Rangers, but one of the Dusters speaks up, as to do so would violate their privacy, and obviously he wants to keep his privacy, which is something that everyone wants, which the Blue Keeper shuts down immediately as he punches punches C's head off, reluctantly allowing the supervision to go through after that, which I think I would too if someone punched my head off. It's also pretty clear from Red Keeper's short speech that they are all delusional, evil, and murderous. The victory over the Dusters has just completely gone to their heads. Now they are just having a power trip, sort of enslaving an entire race of aliens just because they were labeled monsters after trying and failing to attack Earth. Very much gives off some Attack on Titan vibes in that regard, and a bunch of other series, as other people have brought up, like Chainsaw Man and some other stuff that I'm clearly forgetting, goddammit. But once again, D just doesn't realize how obvious he truly is as we see him eat a nice steak dinner in the most inhumane way a person probably could ever do it. Seriously, his right hand is doing this awkward stabbing motion while his left hand is forking the second half of the steak really awkwardly. I mean, he's lucky that Sakurama is a precious good boy and that Yumiko felt he could use him, because if he were to pull this in front of a keeper, oh my god, he'd be dead in an instant. Especially if Yumiko could spot it as quickly as she did. Think about what a ranger could do. What we learn here is that the Dragon Keepers aren't at HQ. Only really Yellow Keeper is, but he only ever shows up on one day of the week, Saturday, go figure. Everyone else is assigned to their respective garrisons though. And this showcases once again that D is a piece of work though with his carelessness, as he blurts out that the Keepers are putting up an act, which shocks Sakurama until Yumiko, inevitably, covers for him, giving the story that she also saw the same video that he saw too. But the conversation takes a turn when a family asks for a picture with Yumiko and Sakurama, and this is a good showcase of what Sakurama's character is all about. He is proud to be a ranger, loves the job, the people, the meaning behind it symbolically, and many other factors. He is a good boy, as I said, and it does show while he is starkly contrasted to the cold and calculating Yumiko Suzukiri. Seeing this, D essentially is like, well, of course you guys would love this job. You get to have free meals, photos with fans from people who adore you, and all the Dusters get in return is slavery. They are forced to lose week after week and are treated like dogs. So it makes sense why D here would be jealous and look down on them for how good they have it. But I must admit, there is a cool story in this too. I think D's experiences with the way humans act will be integral to the future to Duster's understanding of humans and coming to respect them, and maybe even vice versa. I'm just recklessly speculating here, but I can see a subplot being the Dusters, and especially D, learning how to become essentially human. As he goes to get the identity of Sakurama from the kid's picture, he's trying to remind himself that he is a monster and cold-blooded. He's forcing himself into this persona, and I think that's another reason why, because it feels almost like it's unnatural. Like the tides are turning, and what was once considered the villains are now the plucky underdog anti-heroes. So D, as Sakurama decides to tag along with Yumiko, gotta be real, should have been me there. Like the scenes prior, this is just a slaughter for D, showcasing how unprepared and out of his element that he really is. He goes to meet Red Keeper with Yumiko, asking her to give him the letter to personally deliver it to Red Keeper, only to get punked out by this sorta dorkish Tokita who introduces himself as Red Keeper, as D loses his cool and goes to grab the knife in his pocket, only to be grabbed by Tokita by the arm, as he quickly realizes he's gotta find a way out of this as his cover is literally breaking. He continues to be bailed out though by Yumiko, and eventually the letter is given to Tokita for the Red Keeper, and we get some important information about Yumiko here. We learn that Yumiko works in R&D, which allows her more freedoms than, say, joining Red Squadron, which is essentially where all of the crazies go to subjugate the Dusters, which we all know is just an excuse for these a-holes to go out and torture Dusters because society has labeled them as monsters and they would basically essentially get away with it. I think it's pretty clear Yumiko, though, is the smartest character we've met in this series so far, judging by as well what she's about to do to D, and I'd say R&D also allows her to more easily plan out and enact what she wants to do over the long term, which is kill the Rangers. Realizing he's retreating once again like he's always done as a Duster, he runs into the uncloaked Red Keeper where he realizes, well, his identity was right in front of him this entire time and he ignored the clues. like the obvious recruitment posters, which has his identity plastered all over it with his name. Once again, this is another example of how D isn't used to human society or how it even works. He'll need to learn it and live it from here on out to properly go undercover, which is another reason I think the Dusters will take on this story of becoming more human than monsters. But this scene devolves into D almost going for Red Keeper, but instead is dragged into the elevator by Yumiko, as all D can really do is give Red Keeper, well, his reluctant support. It's rather interesting because it almost comes off like a future threat from D. And what can I say? I kind of support him in this endeavor. I also want to see all the keepers kind of go down. Yumiko brings D to a back alley where she lets the jig up and immediately reveals that she knows basically everything about him and that he's a Duster, and she repeatedly goes to cut off his head over and over. Last week, a lot of people in my comment section compared Yumiko Suzukiri to Makima from Chainsaw Man, and I don't think the comparison isn't in just their dead eyes and calculating nature. But after revealing that she's been covering for D the entire day, she decides to ally with the enemy, D. She wants to teach him everything about the Keepers and how to defeat them, because her goal is to ultimately destroy the Ranger force altogether, together with D. Honestly, hot lady stuff aside, of course, this is a no-brainer and a great opportunity for both of them. While Yumiko is very clearly the sadistic type who loves to control, especially over D as evidenced by the choppy, it does feel like their partnership is more symbolic of something greater. Sakurama then appears to tell them there is a Duster attack, which surprises D as it's not on a Sunday. Yumiko turns around only to find that D has all but disappeared, going immediately to, well, what we're about to see. Turns out that Duster F has been set up by the Red Squadron, is confronted by Red Keeper, who uses his divine artifact, Red Dragon Salamandra, to essentially kill Duster F. This is because the divine artifacts are the only things that can kill the Dusters and pass through their immortality ability. In a crazy moment, F essentially reverses roles with Red Keeper to become the hero who never backed down, even in his final moments when cornered. And I just gotta mention this, but I love how Negi Haruba subtly portrays the Dusters being heroic in scenes where traditionally they'd be seen as the bad guys. A great moment is in his final moments. F says that the last 13 years have been meaningless, but today is his final moment, and it was a good day where he fought even though he lost. This to me shows that F was inspired by D's words in episode 1 and decided that it wasn't worth faking or lying anymore, and that today was the day that he stood up for himself and the Dusters, but as well, the humans, the little boy who cheered him on. That's what helped spur him on to keep fighting. He felt like he needed to fight for that kid and D and the Dusters so that he could prove to them both they're not just dogs who lay down for the enemy. Honestly, it's great storytelling and great character development for F in his final moments. Once again, Ranger Reject continues to impress, and judging by last week's comments, you guys are enjoying it just as much as I am. My favorite aspect of this episode, though, is easily the story behind D being very weak and underestimating the humans and overestimating his own abilities. Anyone can see that D is a very weird and strange person, and the fact that he thought Yumiko and Sakurama, especially Yumiko, were oblivious to all of this shows how unprepared he is. That's why the alliance with Yumiko and D is so tantalizing to me. It allows D to have an ally who will help him learn the ropes of human society while also having similar goals to Yumiko, which is destroy the Rangers. That being said, last week you guys pointed out that Yumiko gave you Makima vibes. So, just like Miss Makima, can we trust Miss Yumiko? Or is she simply putting a collar around her new pet's very delicate neck? She has no qualms beheading D at any moment's notice, to the point where she's practically dominating him into submission. So really, just where is their alliance heading, I wonder? Also, gotta give Negi Haruba big props for writing such an already compelling series with compelling plucky anti-heroes like Duster F, who have had a great send-off this episode. The Dragon Keepers and the way the Rangers view the Dusters very much makes me sympathize with them more than pretty much anyone else. With the way F was cheered on by the kid and how D had to keep telling himself that he is a monster, it's just all such a great setup for a great first half of our season. The story has so much potential to grow grow and change, and honestly, I just cannot wait for that. That being said, I also want to try something new and get feedback directly from the C-Tactics community by going over some of the most interesting comments in last week's video on episode 1. So if you want to be featured in the video, maybe you have a unique take, theory, or observation about Ranger Reject or Negi Haruba, then please do your part and leave a comment. The first comment is from Adam Knight, who has been subscribed for 3 years, so thank you very much. He says to give credit to director and staffs for adding more stuff like references and product commercials at the backgrounds. The director is also from Tiger and Bunny, so it actually makes sense. And this is something I forgot, but yeah, the director of Tiger and Bunny is behind this series, and his use of details like product placement is very much a him thing. If you don't know, Tiger and Bunny and Double Decker Doug and Krill, which are both series I think you guys and gals should check out. It's very similar to Ranger Reject, with this difference being Ranger Reject is based more around Sentai instead of superheroes. And with Tiger and Bunny being one of the most beloved properties in Japan, and the director's use of CGI all over this series and that series, he very much has left his mark, and I very much appreciate him for that, and I think he was a great choice for this series. Also, underrated director. Very good. Knows his stuff. Next up, we got a comment from John Alter who says, fun fact, Mao, the VA for Pink Keeper, acted in Super Sentai, or Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger, I hope I pronounced that correctly, as Milfy Luca / Gokai Yellow before she became a voice actor. And this is actually kind of crazy. And I did some research for it, and yes! Pink Keeper indeed was in Kaizoku Sentai Gokaiger as Luca Milfy. Pink Keeper is a whole other topic entirely, so I won't say much about her because I don't want to spoil anyone, but the fact they got someone who is experienced in working this kind of role is a nice detail only anime knows best how to do. Also, another comment from, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Gensis Chosen says, bruh, the writer went from writing harem rom-com to evil version of Power Rangers. So yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but Negi Haruba, the creator of Ranger Reject, indeed also wrote the harem rom-com, The Quintessential Quintuplets. Now, I know, hearing that, you may think that the series is bad because it's a harem. But in reality, much like Ranger Reject, Negi Haruba intentionally went against the expectations, and Quintessential Quintuplets, to me, is the best harem ever made. Why? Because it's almost nothing like a harem at all. Haruba intentionally used the expectations a viewer has of harem to subvert your expectations and actually deliver a very good, well-written series. So if you like how Ranger Reject is also subverting your expectations of what Super Sentai is, then please actually do go out of your way to watch or read the Quintessential Quintuplets. I have also made videos on it in the past, showcasing why it's good and why it's much more than meets the eye, so check that out if you need some more details. But thank you so much everyone for your comments. Once again, if you want your comments read and discussed in the video, then you know what to do. As well, I'd greatly appreciate it if you guys took the time to drop a like and subscribe. Ranger Reject videos aren't the most popular on YouTube, and every little bit of support helps spread the word. If you want to go further with your support, you can pick up some of my fabulous merch featuring art from the amazing Adoraburb, but as well you can support me on Patreon, YouTube memberships, super likes, or through my partner Gamer Subs, where using the code C-Tactics or my link in the pinned comment, you will get 10% off your order. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye-bye.